You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. Manitoba Opera's first production of the season, Li Keur, Riel's Heart of the North, opened this past Saturday. It's hard to overstate the significance of this cross-cultural, boundary-breaking historic opera, the first in Canada to put an Indigenous-led production on a main stage. Now, if you weren't there over the weekend, the good news is that there's still 2 more opportunities to take in the show. And to chat more about it, I'm joined by co-composers Alex Kusturok and Neil Weisensel. Welcome to the studio and congrats on the opera.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, Neil, it's great to have you back. You've had operas premiered before, and I'm sure there's something special about each of them, but I'm curious, how did it feel on Saturday in the pit, leading the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra, all the singers, the dancers, in Li Keur's Riel, Heart of the North?
I was pretty nervous, I'll tell you, at the downbeat. My heart was thumping. I was like, oh my God. And it's like a giant machine. It's like this giant puzzle with all these interconnected pieces. You've got the orchestra, you've got the singers, you've got Alex on stage with 2 other musicians, you've got a chorus, you've got principals, you've got a kids chorus, and there's lighting and there's projections. Like anytime in rehearsals we move a little piece of the puzzle, it rebounded across. So it was like setting this giant machine in motion. And it took me a good 5 minutes to actually just kind of settle down, because I was just kind of going, yikes. So that's, to be honest, that's what it felt like. But then it kind of felt like a dream. It kind of felt so surreal. It's like this thing that I've thought about and imagined for so long is finally happening. And it was just like, it was very, at one point I got caught watching the show. Meanwhile, the narrators are speaking, and it's like, I've got a cue coming up, and I'm like, oh, this is such a nice show. It's like, oh, wait a minute, they're going to say a word, and then I'm going to have to start up. And I was like, really, it was so intense. It was like nothing I've ever done before.
Alex, you were nodding along as Neil was kind of recounting Saturday night. What was your experience like?
Well, it was a little bit, there's always that little bit of nerves of, will people show up? So before the show started, I didn't know that it was sold out, so I had to take a walk out, and I saw it, and it was beautiful. And then there's that set of nerves. I hope I don't miss my first cue, right? And it's as soon as that first cue is kind of done, and then the second cue, you kind of start to get comfy. Like I'm watching Neil, and then Melissa and Jordan are watching me, right? So it's just as soon as we can get through that first cue and kind of hear that people like it, it's kind of straightforward.
Yeah, then you're off and running.
Yes.
So I was reading through your bio, and there are plenty of awards and accolades and highlights. You shared music with Pope Francis as part of the Métis delegation that traveled to Rome back in 2022. You've toured the country and the continent as a musician. You're a 5-time Manitoba Fiddle champion, 8-time Manitoba Métis champ, 2-time winner in BC. Lots of winning going on here, Alex. You're a phenomenal player. But I noticed that there's no past co-composing of operas on your resume. How's it feel to add that to the list of highlights?
Well, it's a big one. It's a big one for sure. And to work with such a great team, they've been so patient with me. They came across me at Folklorama, I think, 2017?
Yeah.
And I was outside once the show was done, and Neil and Suzanne come up and introduce themselves, and they tell me what this project is going to be. And I kind of didn't think too much of it. And then 2020 rolls along, and it was right kind of when the world shut down. Neil gave me a call and asked if I wanted to get to work and start writing and composing. And I went, sure. So that's when I started kind of spewing out tunes, but I wasn't familiar with opera. I wasn't familiar, so I was just writing fiddle tunes. I was writing fiddle tunes for like tunes that I would play at dances, right? Jigs and reels. And, tunes like there's a piece, that the Children's Refugee Chorus, things just started to kind of fit naturally, right? So it was a great process. It was pretty much, can you write this in this key? This is the mood. And it was straightforward like that for the better part of two years, right?
Yeah, and it was like 5 minutes later, how's this? Alex was so fast. He came up with these just tunes that fit perfectly. When you say it fit perfectly, It was so true.
Well, I definitely want to get to that fit more, but first, just to kind of back up a little bit, you're a third-generation fiddle player, Alex, and you make your home now in Sherwood Park. You grew up here in Winnipeg. I'm curious, when we talk about fiddling, it seems like it can be a sort of all-encompassing term, and this is an opera that is billed as a celebration of Métis culture, and of course, fiddling is a big part of that. So how would you characterize Métis fiddling, just speaking kind of more broadly here, Métis fiddling, as compared to some of the other traditional fiddling forms? Like I'm thinking of those in Quebec or in Eastern Canada, like in Cape Breton.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Cape Breton music. I play a lot of Cape Breton music.
Yeah.
Same Quebecois music. So you think of the Métis music, it is adapted from a lot of the Scottish tunes, the Cape Breton music, the Quebecois music, and I think the common thread in that is the rhythm.
Yeah.
That kind of drive to it, that attack. And when I try to describe Métis, it's that pulse, it's that energy, it's that drive, but it's a mix. And it's funny, like you mentioned Cape Breton, you mentioned the Quebecois, it's kind of a cross of all that, because we've listened to these players and we've kind of adapted them into a style, which is the Métis fiddle. So it's kind of, I take a little bit from everybody. And yes, I'm a third generation player. My mom played. So I grew up going to the dances around Manitoba. My mom lives here still. And third generation is kind of a loose term. My grandfather played, but he didn't really play. He could play 4 or 5 tunes, and he would more bring his fiddle into a fiddle contest and compete, because competitors didn't have to pay admission.
That's a good way to do it.
So that's why he would compete. He'd be bringing my mom, but he could play good when he wanted.
I'm sure he played those 4 or 5 tunes real well.
He did. He did. Yes.
So Neil, let me ask you, as a composer, as a professor who teaches music and music theory, what was it that first captured your attention when it came to fiddling in the music?
Well, seeing Alex perform was like, whoa, this guy's like so good and so much fire. He brings so much fire and passion and rhythm and drive to the piece. And so when he said yes, I was just so happy. And it's not, I've never worked with another composer before. Composers are usually lone wolves doing it. And it's kind of lonely. There I am, I'm sitting at my keyboard and I'm working away, but this way is like Alex would come up with a tune, he'd send it to me, and then I would come up with some of what I thought the harmonies could be, and I'd play that in the piano and send it back to him, and he's like, oh, that's cool. What would you think of putting this chord there, maybe that chord there? So then we'd kind of go back and forth a little bit. So that was really fun for me, and I feel like I really learned a lot from Alex, and it was really fun. It was very, very fun to be able to collaborate. I
mean, this whole thing just sounds, you keep coming back to the word fun, but it really sounds like this is, and we keep talking about this as a celebration, but that is indeed what this is, whether it was the two of you co-composing together or the final realization on the Centennial Concert Hall stage. Now, full disclosure, I haven't yet seen the production. I'm so looking forward to doing so, but last week, Julie Lumsden and Evan Corbett, who are vocal soloists in the opera, were with me in studio, and I asked them how they would characterize the music. Here's what Evan had to say.
It's very accessible. You look at it on the page and you think, how's this going to sound? And then you hear it as it all comes together and you're like, oh, of course, that's totally relatable. And, you would hear a lot of it, going to a kitchen party. You're like, oh yeah, there's somebody, old granddad pulls out his fiddle and you're like, there you go. And that's what it sounds like. And I think that's it's very welcoming in that way. But it also contains aspects of the new music. So sometimes you'll hear stuff and you're like, that's definitely new to my ear.
That was a little snippet of Evan Corbett's response. Neil, how does that sound to you? Kitchen party meets modern operatic vernacular.
Well, yes. I mean, there's something in the show for everybody. I remember when we went to a Métis celebration at Riel House in St. Vital, and there was fiddlers playing and guitars playing, and then a couple of the singers from the opera came and they sang a couple of arias. So the arias or the songs are just they're more operatic. So I was kind of checking out, seeing what people were thinking, and after that, I was kind of walking around, and I think I'd been introduced earlier on, but people didn't really know who I was so much. And I heard a guy say, well, you can't jig to that. And I thought, that's very true. And then I had another lady say, oh, I could have listened to that all day. And so to the guy that said you can't jig to that, I said, no, not that specific thing. But believe me, there's plenty of tunes in this opera that you can jig to.
You know, I find it so interesting, Alex, that Evan mentions, you know, it seems like there are tunes that Granddad would pull out at a kitchen party and perform. And here you are talking about, you know, your grandfather playing and the tradition of this music. Did you ever think you would hear Métis fiddling as part of the musical backbone of an opera?
No, and there is a funny story. When I arrived for sound check or for rehearsals, I had mentioned to one of the stage managers, I'm going, I can't wait to sit in the concert hall and plug in the fiddle and plug in the footboard and have a sound check. And I just remember the blank look going, sound check. And I didn't think too much about it. But then when we approached going to the theater, and I'm going, well, Neil, what time sound check? Well, we don't really have one. And then I sit down and I bring my patch cable to plug my pickup in, my footboard in, how I plug in to play live, right? I was just doing the Heritage Classic in Edmonton, and that's how I'm picturing this. You know, lots of power within the fiddle and feet. And the sound tech went, nope, here's a mic. And I'm going, well, no. So we had a big meeting, sitting down, and it was with the sound guy. And keep in mind, this is so new for me, like Neil touched on. If you want something done, you need to go through probably 8 or 10 people to get that thing done.
It is a production. It is truly a production.
Which is new for me because I'm used to working with one sound guy. So we're sitting there, and I'm trying to explain what we want. It's like, this is a Métis piece. We need the footwork coming through. Like when you walk into Festival Park and you hear this, it's such a drive. You can feel it, right? And it was funny. It was like the light bulb went on in his head, and he goes, so what we were thinking is that you were kind of acting out these Métis scenes, but what this is, it's festival with a side of opera. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of when the light went on. It's like, we need to hear the guitar. We need to hear the fiddle because the orchestra's following me. So it's like you walk in, you could swear that you're walking into Festival Park, except you have a full production behind it. But it was just seeing that moment of, this is festival with a side of opera. Mm-hmm. That was really cool to just kind of see these people who have done so many operas kind of come to that conclusion. It was really sweet.
If you're just tuning in, my name is Simon Rusnak. You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107, and I'm chatting with co-composers of Li Keur, Riel's Heart of the North, Alex Kusturok and Neil Weisensel. Just kind of picking up on what you're kind of describing there, Alex. I mean, opera is one of these quintessential European art forms, right? And it's been combined here with this traditional Métis fiddle music as well as Indigenous language and culture. There's a lot of talk about reconciliation and what that can look like. And to me, as a white settler of Ukrainian heritage, this seems like a really big step forward. Neil, can we talk about your own positionality and approach to this project?
Well, yeah. I mean, I knew way back that I wanted to be involved in reconciliation somehow, but I wasn't really sure how that was going to happen. And so through our mutual agent, Suzanne and I met and found out that we had a common interest in creating a news story about Louis Riel. And so that's kind of where it started. And, you know, Alex talks about learning how the text learned about, you know, it's festival with a side of opera. And there was, you know, now me learning the next production of this, we need a 3-hour sound check. Right, because the opera production is this giant machine that has a way of making things happen, and there wasn't any time for us to do what we needed to do, but we didn't know that we had to say. There was just, if I had a do-over, I would have done it differently, and we got there in the end. But as far as the reconciliation part, you know, when I was talking to Paulette Duguay, she plays the grandmother, and she's the president of the Union Nationale Métis de Saint-Joseph. She's also one of Louis Riel's great grand nieces. And very early, like about 5 years ago, she was saying, you know what, tell me about and this was before I even knew she was going to be in the show. I didn't know she was an actor. And she said, you know, with all the stuff you've been telling me about this project, I really think that maybe reconciliation is possible. And I really felt good about that. And it made me, you know, really committed to trying to bring this piece to the stage.
Earlier, I played a little snippet of my conversation with Evan Corbett and Julie Lumsden. And what they made so clear in the conversation is just how many communities are involved in this and truly invested in this project. And it really is a partnership, isn't it, Alex?
It really is. And I think what's amazing about this is we're in Manitoba, but there's Métis leaders from all over that are going to come down and see this piece. Like, it's very inclusive. It's, you know, if whoever wants to come and see this, regardless of where you're from, you know, we will make it that you can come and see it. It's not a political piece. It's not backed by any political or organization, and that's on purpose. We want everybody, you know, to experience this, to feel welcome. And, you know, what does Suzanne say? It's like to just be with us, right? And that's what's powerful about it being here, but it also being non-political as well.
I mean, there are two more opportunities to take in the show. If anyone's kind of sitting on the fence at home, what would you say to them to get them to come down to the Centennial Concert Hall and take in this production, this festival with a side of opera, which is just a great line, I gotta say.
Well, there's 50 tickets or so left for each show. There's not many, but I think the highlight of it and what it must be, I was talking to my wife who was in the crowd on opening night, and she said that for the first time at a concert, when you're viewing something like this and you're hearing the fiddle brings people together at the dances, right? People come from, you know, when dances used to be out in Oak Bluff, farmers would come from here, and it would bring everybody together. That's what she felt. It was like people were coming together for a dance. That must have been what it felt like. So it's the feel of just being together and watching this.
Yeah, this call to the arts. Neil, anything you wanted to add?
I was just going to say, I can pretty much guarantee that if you come to see the show, you've never seen anything like this. I can pretty much guarantee that.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It is a historic event, and people can be there. Very few tickets left available. mbopera.ca, the place to go, or head online to classic107.com to find all the details. Alex, Neil, thanks so much for joining me, and congrats again on Li Keur. This is so exciting. I can't say it enough times. It's just such a big deal, and so thrilled that you could join me here in the studio.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.